over at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of stuff going on over there as always. Danny Vorgs' updated NFL power ratings and model projections for the wildcard weekend games listed over there at the website. I wrote up previews on all 4 of those games, so you can check those out. And right in those previews are links to the YouTube videos that Brian Blessing did for us, breaking down those 4 NFL playoff games here for this week. Bowl season still going on. We still have previews of all the remaining bowl games, and I wrote up a preview of Clemson and LSU for you to check out. Doing college basketball stuff on the daily, NHL stuff with Parker Michaels every day, NBA content as well. We get soccer previews up over at the website, golf stuff from James Mazzola. UFC comes back, I believe, next weekend, maybe 2 weeks, something like that. But we preview all the UFC events over at the website, and I actually finished up the UFC year doing pretty well in 2019 with the last few events. So hopefully we can keep that rolling here on into the new year. But I'll also be doing NASCAR once that rolls around here again in February, and my Major League Baseball season win total guide. Last year, 21-9 on the overall picks for the season win totals in that guide. It is my labor of love. It is a lot of hard work. Going to be starting that here probably on Friday and then carrying that on over into next week, writing some of the team intros, kind of talking about how they finished up last year relative to their expectations from a Pythagorean win-loss standpoint, also base runs, third-order win percentage, stuff like that. So I'll have a primer in the beginning of the guide that explains all those different things, but those adjusted records and the actual records and some evaluation of that will be in those team intros. So even though we're still waiting to see where all these players are going to wind up for the offseason, a lot of trade candidates, a lot of free agents still out there as well. Hey, you know what? Spring training only about, 5 or 6 weeks away now. The early start to the season there that last week of March. So try to get that Major League Baseball guide out to you a little bit earlier here this time around. So I'll have plenty of baseball stuff coming your way over at BangTheBook.com here in the very near future. All right, so we'll start with a recap here of the Westgate SuperContest for 2019. And, I fell a little bit below 500, not where I wanted to be at all for this NFL season. A very difficult NFL season at the outset. Couldn't really get into a groove. Couldn't really, just sort of find that niche, find that rhythm, find that comfort zone here over the course of the season. And, I think part of it is there's so much football information out there. And, you've got a lot of analytics these days. You've got a lot of places that provide analytics. You've got a lot of things like Havoc Rate, DVOA, the Pro Football Focus grades, all that kind of stuff. You've got, there was so much stuff coming to the season about how teams did in 11 personnel, how teams did in 12 personnel. And I think I need to incorporate a lot more of that here as we go forward. A lot of what I like to do across a lot of the different sports, and I will mention some of this stuff with regards to basketball and hockey here a little bit later on in the segment, I like situational handicapping a lot because I think situational handicapping provides some shortcuts. I'm very, very busy with a lot of the tasks that I have over at BangTheBook.com and just in my day-to-day life. So, I try to find some shortcuts. I try to find some starting points on these games to the point where I can narrow my focus a little bit. And I think sometimes I maybe discarded some games a little bit too early in the process that maybe I should have taken a little bit more of a look at, because in a lot of instances you go into an NFL week saying, well, I can't back that team or I can't lay that number with that team. I'm just going to cross that game off. And when you've got to pick 5 of 16 games, in weeks where there are no bye weeks, if you've got to pick 5 out of 12, not taking the Thursday game, then you've got 6 teams on a bye, you got to pick 5 of the 12 games. So I think I'm doing myself a disservice by crossing out some of those games on the NFL cards so early in the process. So I think that's something that I really have to commit to is looking at every game, giving each game the time that it deserves. Because a lot of times the games that nobody wants to touch are the games that are going to have the most value, the games that could end up having the most variance. And certainly in something like the Super Contest where, people are going to flock to teams that they feel like they can trust. And I've talked about this before with some of the game theory angles of being in the Super Contest. how you want to take half points as often as you can because pushes aren't as valuable as going for the full point when you're talking about 85 picks in this contest. Stuff like that. Not canceling out some of those games. I think there were 3 or 4 times this season where I had an opinion on the Thursday night game and it would have come through. And obviously it's difficult because you want to pay attention to the injury reports. You want to know who's actually going to be playing on Sunday, that it's tough to take that Thursday night game. But I probably left 3 or 4 points out there because I wasn't prepared to take that Thursday night game. That's something I need to take a little bit more of a look at as well. Trying to have a better idea of what I want to do so that if that Thursday game does wind up being one of my 5 strongest opinions, I can go ahead and pounce on that game. And something else, too, is, I've talked about this a lot across all of the different sports betting markets, but you have to have confidence. And I went into the NFL season without a whole lot of confidence because I did so poorly in baseball last year. And you really got to be able to wipe the slate clean. And it's a very difficult thing to do, especially because baseball has kind of been my thing over at BangTheBook.com since I started there way back in 2013. And it's tough when you come off of a bad season and you start another market, especially a market like the NFL, where it's a tough market to beat. It's very efficient. The lines are very tight. Everybody knows all of the players. Everybody knows the value of the key numbers and all that type of thing. It's a very tight market. And I think I kind of went into it with a little bit of a defeatist attitude. And that's not a good thing to have in this business. And maybe this is kind of fitting with this show being a couple days after New Year's, but that's kind of one of my betting resolutions going into 2020 is, you've got to have a short-term memory with your results and a long-term memory with how you got to your decision. And what I mean by that is, you can do everything you can in the lead up to the handicap. Once you submit that bet, once that ticket is printed for you, or once you make that mobile wager, that's it. There's nothing more that you can do. Unless you're going to go in and live bet or play derivatives, first halves or second halves, something like that, maybe play some player props. Those are all things that you probably need to look at independent of that bet that you've already locked in. And that's something that, was a challenge for me this year, was that, I would lament the fact that, I missed this, or, of course I'm falling on the wrong side of turnover margin again, or something like that. You have to have confidence in this business. Whether you have to have confidence in the numbers that you create for yourself, like I do in college football, or you just have to have confidence in your handicapping process, confidence in the resources that you're using, confidence in whatever it is that you're justifying to lock that bet in. And that was something I never found throughout 2019, really in any sport. And I had good moments, and I had bad moments, and I had good calls, and I had bad calls. But you've got to look at this as a long-term game. And it can be very, very emotional when you look at this in the short term. When you fall victim to what those short-term streaks and short-term variances mean. And in something like the SuperContest, it's very hard to stay above that fray because you're only making 85 picks. But again, every time I finish with the SuperContest, every time I finish with a season, and this is why I try to ask our guests about this on the show, I think back. I think back to what worked for me. I think back to what didn't work for me. And something that really didn't work for me, I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe in my handicaps. I didn't believe that I could find some sort of angle in one of those, misfit games, for lack of a better term. I just threw them away. I just discarded them. I just tried to make it easier on myself to just say, well, I don't like anything here. And it's very hard to do that in an NFL marketplace with a limited number of games and in the SuperContest with a limited number of picks. So that's something that I'm going to look to do here in 2020. And hopefully that's something that resonates with you as well. If you're coming off of a bad year, no matter what the sport was. If you're coming off of a bad season, you always want to find out why, especially if you want to take this seriously. I get emails all the time throughout the week. Adam, what can I do to make this a career? What can I do to make this a job? What can I do to get better at this, to make it more of a supplement instead of just something that I do for fun? And my answer is almost always the same. You've got to know what you want to achieve out of it, and you've got to have an idea of how you want to get there and what you want to use to get to that point. And for me in the NFL, I listen to a lot of different sources. I listened to other podcasts. I looked at a lot of things statistically. But then I also fell back on some of my old methods of handicapping, like looking at situational spots and things of that sort. And situational spots are great when they work out, and they make you look like a fool when they don't. And I think nowadays, in something like the NFL, where you've got nutritionists and so many more medical advances and so many more travel advances and the comforts of travel, with 6 days off between games, I don't think it really matters that much anymore. Yeah, you may be coming off of a physical game, or you may be playing back-to-back road games or something like that. But there were several instances where situational spots never came close. I think that's something I need to downplay when you talk about the NFL. Because, again, we're talking about 6 days between games for the most part. And do situational spots really matter that much? I don't think so. And maybe this is something I should have realized a couple of years ago, but it's something that I realize now as it pertains to the NFL. So that's something that I'm not going to say I'm going to completely eliminate it from my handicapping, but unless it's an absolutely extreme example, an overtime game at altitude, a team playing back-to-back road games a long way from home, and they go home in between the games, something like that, I don't think I'm going to bother with situational handicapping in the NFL next year. And is it too little, too late? I don't think so. Maybe for this season, but I don't think it is for future seasons. So that's something that I'm going to look to change when it comes to the Super Contest, and something that, like I said, maybe resonates a little bit with our listeners out there. And speaking of changes, there are some changes coming to the Super Contest here. I think these are very good for the players. First of all, the sign-up period will actually begin on January 13th. So it's a day of the College Football National Championship game. So people that are going to Vegas throughout the year can go ahead and sign up for the Super Contest. That also includes signing up for the Super Contest Gold and getting in early for the Super Contest Reboot. So if you want to get involved in the Super Contest for next year, Maddie and Tony over at footballcontest.com. Once again, they did a phenomenal job as our proxy service this year. Great work by them, as always, not just in the Super Contest, but also in the Circa Million and the Gold Nugget Ultimate Football Challenge. But now you can sign up throughout the year pretty much. So if you're going out to Vegas for a conference or something like that, or you can't get out there in the summer because your kids are out of school or whatever else, well, now you can sign up very, very early for the Super Contest. Sign up starting January 13th. Next, I've talked about this a lot, that I think the Circa Sports Million was an excellent contest this year. They gave the quarter prizes, gave you some reason to still have some skin in the game, give you some reason to still be invested. And I figured that the Circa would be a catalyst for some changes here for the Super Contest, and that is absolutely the case. So now, for each quarter, the top three going to get paid in the Super Contest, $100,000 for first, $25,000 for second, $10,000 for third. So we're talking about $135,000 being handed out for each quarter. So $540,000 for in-season bonuses here. The Westgate is contributing $100,000 of their own money. So we'll see if that comes out of the rake or something like that. But the quarter prizes, I think, are something that's a really good attribute for these contests, a very good selling point. Because if you get off to a bad start, and I got off to a horrendous start last year, well, 2 years ago, I guess now, in the Super Contest, I was 10-25-5 over the first 40 weeks, or over the first 40 picks, over the first 8 weeks. I went 31-13-1 the rest of the way. Now, I don't know if that necessarily would have been good enough for any sort of quarter prize, but if you get off to a bad start for whatever reason, you've got a chance to actually win something here in these contests. So I think the in-season bonuses, the quarter bonuses, fantastic for the Super Contest. Loved them in the Circa. And with the Circa probably increasing in size again next year, I would presume that there will be some differences there with that as well. another difference here. And I'm not sure how this one's going to go over. I'll be very interested to see what happens. I can't imagine the proxy services are too thrilled about this. But the weekly deadline for picks now goes from 11 a.m. Pacific to 11 p.m. Pacific. So 12 more hours to look at the card here. Now, again, I don't know necessarily if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Now, obviously, there's going to be more clarity in terms of the injury reports and stuff like that. But with lines moving around on Saturday a little bit, with, people there making their college football bets, looking at the NFL card, kind of having some influence there, this may lead to a lot more people chasing that line value in the Super Contest. Now, I don't know, again, if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I think if you're kind of trying to decide between your fourth and fifth pick, it could be a good thing to go ahead and take some of that stale line value because, again, these lines still come out on Wednesday evening for the Super Contest. But the 11 p.m. Pacific deadline now on Saturdays gives you a lot more time, gives the market a lot more time to mature, kind of see where these numbers are going to wind up closing. So that will be very interesting to see how that sort of plays into the mix here. Because this is a much later deadline than the Circa unless they decide to move theirs. And we already saw some differences in the lines from the Super Contest and the Circa Million. So that should be kind of an interesting thing to take a look at for next year. With that later deadline, it's not great for me because now the pick counts aren't going to come out until early Sunday morning for the East Coast. So the article not going to have nearly as much lead time, not nearly as much shelf life. So that's kind of a bummer for that. But I will be very interested to see, what happens in terms of the top 5 consensus with a lot of people probably just chasing line value now. So that should be something that will be pretty interesting to say the least. But I do think that the in-season bonuses are great. The earlier sign-up date is great. And also the Westgate saying that more upgrades are coming. And again, competition in the market for these contests certainly breeds some changes. And I'm very happy to see that the Westgate is being proactive here. I would certainly expect that the Circa Million winds up being proactive as well. So once again, January 13th, the sign-up date for the Westgate Super Contest, also the Super Contest Gold and the Super Contest Reboot. If you want to get involved, reach out to Maddie and Tony over at footballcontest.com to be your proxy. Again, try to work something out with them whenever you're going to be out there because you still need to sign up in person for the Super Contest, and your proxy will need to be there with you. So you'll have to reach out to Maddie and Tony, see when they're available, when you're going to be out there in town. But once again, a very early sign-up period here for the Westgate Super Contest. So we did talk a lot about the NFL playoffs here, the wild card weekend on Tuesday and Thursday's editions of Bang the Book Radio. So you know my thoughts on the cards there for the wild card weekend. And again, I think the best plays are looking to go the teaser route, with Buffalo, with New Orleans, take them through 3 and 7. Philadelphia, if you want to spin one that way as well. Recording this on Thursday early evening here, so no change in the lines. You've got a lot of practice report stuff coming out here on Thursday and Friday. Once we get some better clarity, especially because a lot of these teams playing on Saturday and Sunday have a lot of injuries of concern, once we see some more clarity with that, the markets will start to move quite a bit. So again, you've got my 4 previews over at bangthebook.com. You've got the video looks from Brian Blessing and also our previous segments here on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday with Brian Blessing, Thursday with Brad Powers for this weekend in the NFL. So with college football winding down, with the NFL winding down, I think we're probably going to see a lot more public money out there in the college basketball marketplace. So what I wanted to do here on this segment today, like I said, kind of a grab bag segment of sorts, I want to take a look at college basketball for Friday night and just highlight a few games that are out there to kind of give you an idea of some things to look for here. Again, your time is valuable. My time is valuable. So I try to look for those little shortcuts that kind of give me a starting point on a game. Not a play, but a starting point on a game. Now, it's easier here with the Friday night college basketball card because there's, about 30 or so games, 20 or so games, something like that. So it's one of those things where you don't have to worry about handicapping a 150-game card. However, you still want to find some starting points, some points of reference that you can try to use to your advantage. And line value is very important in college basketball. It is a higher variance sport because, obviously just the nature of the game. You've got 70 possessions in a game as opposed to maybe 15 in an NFL game, something like that. So it is higher variance in that regard, but you still want to get out in front of these and try to get the best numbers that you possibly can. And you want to go out there and try to get some line value out of this whole equation as well. So let's take a look here for this Friday night card, and only Bet Online available as I'm recording here with overnight lines. So those are going to be my frame of reference. Again, by Friday morning, a lot of these things could change fairly dramatically. The markets will be active and moving as they always are. But for January 3rd here, the Horizon League, Wisconsin Green Bay, now they're just known as Green Bay, the Green Bay Phoenix, hosting Illinois Chicago. As conference play gets underway, we've talked about this on our segments with Kyle Hunter. We'll keep driving this point home. As conference play gets underway, some of these teams have played really good schedules, and some of these teams have not. And in a vacuum, is that the be-all, end-all? No, it's not. But you can get a really good idea of how true a team's statistical profile is based on who they've played. For example, Wisconsin Green Bay here, in game 845, 846 on Friday night. The Phoenix have played the 21st ranked schedule in the country, according to KenPom. Illinois Chicago has played the 253rd ranked schedule, according to KenPom. Green Bay opening a 6-point favorite with a little bit of extra juice in that game. But again, they've played a much, much, much tougher schedule. So what does that mean? Well, from a handicapping standpoint, what that means is that you really want to go and look at the statistical profiles of these two teams and try to figure out if you can find some edges from that. Because again, you've got a team in Green Bay that has played a much more difficult schedule. So Green Bay, for example, if you look over at Bart Torvik's website, and his game capsules are absolutely phenomenal, Green Bay is 48th in the country in adjusted offensive efficiency. They are 328th in adjusted defensive efficiency. But again, remember what I just told you about over at KenPom. Green Bay has played the 21st ranked schedule. They've played the 27th ranked schedule of opposing offenses. So yeah, their defense probably is going to be pretty bad. Look at Illinois, Chicago. They've already actually played a couple of conference games against Cleveland State and Youngstown State. Same thing for Green Bay. They played Wright State and Northern Kentucky. But Illinois, Chicago here on the season, they are 255th in adjusted offensive efficiency, 166th in effective field goal percentage on offense. So Green Bay, yeah, their defense has not played well, but they've been playing very good offensive teams. Illinois, Chicago is not a good offensive team. So that's your starting point for the handicap here. Because you've got this massive strength of schedule discrepancy, you can take a little bit closer of a look and say, okay, well, Green Bay's defense is bad by the numbers, but this offense isn't on the level of the offenses that they've been playing. So what does that mean for me in this handicap? Let's look at another one. Manhattan takes on Canisius in MAAC action. Now, we don't have a lot of data points for the MAAC conference teams because they haven't played a whole lot of games so far. But Manhattan here, 288th in strength of schedule. And even with a very weak schedule, the Jaspers are 334th in adjusted offensive efficiency per KenPom. So this is a team that has not played a good schedule at all, and they're still terrible on offense. They're 113th in adjusted defensive efficiency. So they've played a little bit better on the defensive side. You look at Canisius, and they're a team that they've played a little bit tougher of a schedule, but still not a great schedule by any means. 185th in the country. So that's not very good. But they're also a bad offensive team, and they've played some bad defensive teams. So maybe you look in that game at an under, where Manhattan is a bad offensive team, Canisius not a very good offensive team, and they've played a bad slate of opposing defenses. the under is your starting point there. Then you try to poke holes in that. You say, okay, what sort of tempo will this game be played at? Has Canisius been on the road so much that maybe it hurts their shooting numbers? But you go and look here, Canisius turns the basketball over a ton. Well, that's not going to matter if you're home or away. If you're turning the basketball over a lot, that's a very bad thing to say the least. So you get some starting points here for these types of things. Niagara is another one in the MAAC. A 2-9 team so far this season. They played the 72nd strength of schedule. Fairfield is 4-7. They played the 159th strength of schedule. Niagara with a terrible defensive efficiency. But again, they played a very hard schedule. Fairfield's an awful offensive team. So you've got a team here that could be a little bit undervalued as a home underdog getting 3 points based on the caliber of opponents, based on the statistical profile relative to those opponents. One other one for a major conference here, Rutgers. Great story. Rutgers playing very well here at the outset of the season. They've also played the worst schedule in the country of any Big Ten team. It ranks 204th according to KenPom. Nebraska's schedule, 156th. But they're at home getting 5 on the overnight lines from BetOnline. Maybe Nebraska to play there because Rutgers now stepping up a little bit in class, playing a true conference road game. These are the types of things that you can look for here to where, are they always going to win? No, absolutely not. Nothing is a lock in this business. Nothing is a surefire proposition in this business. But again, you can use a lot of this information to your advantage, not just to make plays, not just to narrow down the card, but also to get some line value. Because a lot of times these things are going to move in your favor. If there's a big strength of schedule discrepancy, a lot of times that line is going to move. And you even look here, you look at the Friday game with Rutgers and Nebraska. Rutgers is listed as a 7-point favorite on the road by Bart Torvik. The line comes out 5. Does it move towards Torvik's line? Does it move down? Is it already shaded because Rutgers hasn't really played anybody? Those are all questions that you can go ahead and then answer at that point in time. So strength of schedule mismatches. Look at the ranks of opposing offenses and opposing defenses for these teams. You're going to find some good values here early on in the conference portion play of the season because there are such large discrepancies with these teams with whom they've played and also the caliber of opponents that they've played both offensively and defensively. So I think it's a really good thing to do. And again, it's very easy with the Friday night card with a limited number of games, but try to find some of these things. Try to find some of these statistical mismatches to where maybe you find some line value. Maybe you find some good opportunities. And also, too, another example, look for teams that maybe played weaker schedules and really struggled when they stepped up in class. Because if they play the top teams in their respective conferences, those may be difficult spots for them. So there's a lot of stuff you can do right now with college basketball. I think this is a very, very good time to get into the market if you haven't already been dabbling in it, because you can find a lot of these things that maybe aren't going to be accounted for by the odds makers out there. Because, again, they're still trying to worry about NFL playoff exposure, national championship exposure coming up with the prop bets for Clemson and LSU. It is hard to take 120, 130, 150 games and line all of them accurately. So you're going to find values in the college basketball betting market using some of those things that I just mentioned, in particular, strength of schedule discrepancies, strength of schedule in terms of opposing offenses and opposing defenses. I think those are really, really key factors you can use to your advantage in college basketball here at this time of the year. Other than that, taking a look at the NBA and the NHL. Now that we're between the holidays here, we're between the holidays, not yet to the All-Star breaks, the dog days of winter can kind of set in. There will be some opportunities to make plays based on scheduling spots here. For example, Miami on Friday night, coming off of a home game against Toronto, playing a fellow top contender in the Eastern Conference. Yeah, it's a division game against Orlando, but could be a little bit of a letdown factor for Miami in a situation like that. So, again, Not always a play. It's always price dependent, but it's a starting point. And if you're busy, you've got a 9 to 5, you've got a family, you've got other things going on, you can use these starting points and then decide, okay, that line looks good for me to take. That line looks good for me to go ahead and make a play. Or, you know what? Yeah, that spot is there, but I just don't like this price. I've handicapped X, Y, and Z. I don't think there's value in that. Again, I think these things are very important starting points for you. And with the more repetitive nature of these daily winter sports, I think situational handicapping still plays a big role in the NBA, NHL, and college basketball because you've got the quicker turnaround. Now that we're into conference play in college hoops, you're playing Thursday, Saturday, or Saturday, Monday, or Wednesday, Sunday, something like that. So, you have an idea of when you're going to be playing, but also a quicker turnaround than being off for 6 days in the NFL or in college football, something like that. So, again, there's a lot of games on a nightly basis here with these daily winter sports. Try your best to find little things that work for you to narrow down the card, to narrow your focus, to get a better idea of what you want to be looking at. Because again, time is money. Time is very important. And also, too, one other thing on the college basketball side I'll mention here, then we'll get into the odds report. Don't be afraid to specialize in close conferences to you, where you can get information from newspapers, where you've got more geographic awareness. Those things are important. Because if you're stepping into college basketball right now and you're trying to handicap all 353 teams, you're not going to be able to do it. And you're even behind the 8 ball if you're trying to do the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, something like that. Find a couple of mid-majors or low majors where you're still going to be able to find some value and become an expert on those. Is it sexy? No. Are you going to find those games on TV all the time? No. But you know what? You're probably going to have better luck betting the games that aren't nationally televised than you are the Dukes and the Gonzagas and the Kansases and the Michigan States of the world, because everybody knows everything about those teams already. Those lines are very tight. Look to specialize in some of those mid and low majors. Look for those strength of schedule discrepancies. Look for some of the things I've been talking about here. I think you're going to find a lot of value in the college basketball markets at this point in time if you're able to use some of those things in your handicapping process. So, like I said, a grab bag of sorts segment here, just talking about a lot of different things. It's tough with a holiday week to find a guest on short notice here for Friday. So figured I would just take the segment myself, kind of talk about some different things that have sort of been on my mind a little bit, and also talk about some of those adjustments to the Westgate SuperContest.